The seat of power, which we heard some testimony today, the seat of power of the medical board is to accuse physicians of being impaired. If they accuse you of being impaired, you must consent without a reasonable trial, without exculpatory evidence being released to you, which we just heard, until it is so late in the game that you are either beaten down, financially indigent, or commit suicide. I spent $1 million on lawyers. I know more about this process than anybody in this room, including the lawyers for the board, because I have been through it. And I will tell you this. The Constitution of the United States is about 4,400 words. There is no due process in that place. What this bill purports to do, a Physician's Bill of Rights, we need this. I won't say much more. We need this. The Senate, despite some mild opposition, voted unanimously to pass this. You mentioned, I think, your relative or daughter-in-law. I have saved people's lives. I get phone calls every day. And just so you know, I was a moderately successful physician financially, not a rich guy. As my decorator said, just rich enough not to embarrass my rich friends, of which I have no friends anymore, except a few. I don't have a home anymore. I don't have a car. I'm essentially homeless, living in a motorhome. I lost my license in California, Mississippi, Alabama, where I pioneered, where I invented spinal instruments, where I teach surgery. And they have accused me, they basically photocopied the charges against me. No consent agreement. I was never offered a consent agreement. And the reason being was, what did I do? I'm not impaired. I'm not a drug addict. I'm not a drunk. I don't drink. I work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I come home 10, 11 o'clock at night, and my poor wife, a nurse, puts up with this nonsense, or used to. And now I couldn't find her a doctor. She has some health problems. We had to go to Maryland. I had to drive 1,200 miles to Maryland every 3.5 weeks so she could see a doctor. So I'm a homeless, unemployable, Harvard-trained physician, the best in his field that this state has ever seen. And I'm not an egotistical guy. I'm just looking at the landscape. I'm the one that would never have an MRI on somebody with a metal object in their head without doing a CT scan first. But I watch my MRI scanner for $2 million and my CT scanner for $1 million get packed up in a box and go to Dubai. Because I lost my building, I lost my home, and I lost my ability to take care. The most severe thing is I lost my ability to take care of the people that need me. Some of them couldn't be here today, but we spoke on the phone. And they wish they could, but they are too sick to come. So what I tell you is this. I sat in a hearing for 3 days at 630 Camp Street, which is, by the way, the most heavily fortified building in the state of Louisiana. You can't get in there. There's armed guards after armed guards and bulletproof glass and elevators. And my poor wife, when we had my hearing, we don't like to be tried in the dark. I think in the American justice system, the courts are open. Anybody can go and sit in a courtroom, just like this chamber is open. They made her sit on the street corner in Louisiana, in New Orleans, in the middle of the night. While I stewed for 3 days, and I said to my lawyer, Joe Bruno, who's a smart guy, and Joe said to me, "Oh my God, I've never seen anything like this in my life," but he was trying to, preserve my license. But Joe was good enough to discount every charge that they made against me. But it didn't matter because the decision was predetermined. And that's what you don't realize, is that all of these decisions are predetermined by a nefarious group of people who love power and money. So let me just tell you about the money. The governor makes $127,000 plus dollars. An appeals court judge gets $159,000 or $157,000. Celia Mouton gets about $300,000 with benefits. I believe her niece is over there, and she has a job for $108,000. The law firm of Adams and Reese gets $2.5 million. Rick Stanley and his little law firm gets $1.3 million. The unlicensed investigators get over $100,000, and I think you guys and ladies are getting $16,500 plus a small amount of expenses, right? Now, in the midst of a budget crisis, for years they voted themselves raises. They voted themselves raises. And if you look at the lawsuits, Parker versus Mouton, Michelle Parker, I spoke to a minute ago, she couldn't be here. 10 black employees were fired in one day or a short time. And why were they fired? Not because these were decorated, hardworking people. Why were they fired? To support the high salaries and the legal fees. You as a lawyer would be shocked. There's no due process. And the reason these people signed those consent forms because they had a gun to their heads. And if you look at the bottom of most of them, you waive your constitutional rights at the end of it. You waive your constitutional rights. And I don't think any American should be made to waive their constitutional rights to support their families. And that's why these people committed suicide. I wake up every morning and I think about committing suicide. You know what? But I'm not gonna, because this woman here needs me. My children are sufficient. Although they would be depressed, they don't need me to survive. My wife has developed so many illnesses as a result of the stress of this and the loss of her home. And I will ask you in a very short way, do not believe what they tell you. And if you want to see documents, I got 11,000 pages of them for you. And please come to my Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals hearing, which I'll announce the date. I would like all of you to come. Then let's see how the cow ate the cabbage, I think, as the saying goes. But I want to
Suicides.
I want
Dr.
to
Burdine,
leave you with a couple of things. Number one, the Dr. Suicides will continue. I hope I'm not one of them, but you will see more. Number two, I want to introduce you to Dana in a minute, which was the center point of my prosecution, and I want to talk a minute about Tanya James. In the as a prosecutor, I'm sure you do everything you can to make your case work, and so does the defense attorney. But you need evidence, and you need to exchange evidence. And what Representative Jackson was saying is absolutely true. You don't get the evidence. So I sat there in a hearing where they had a fake judge that gets $250,000, and he was a reasonable guy, but some people will do things for $250,000 that they might have not done otherwise. And I had a fake judge, and so the lawyer for the prosecutor is like the DA, is also the lawyer for the board, who is the jury. And then the judge, we had an old judge named Judge Ellis, who was, I think, a pretty respectable guy, and he said in the beginning, we're going to give you all the discovery you want. And then he was overruled by Dawson, the president of the medical board, who substituted himself as a judge, and then the lawyer for the investigator became the lawyer for the jury and judge. And so what I'm saying is this is an anathema. This was said no in Haygood versus the Louisiana State Dental Board. And you guys came and passed a law, 843, which became 441 in 2014, and they came here and swore that they were going to straighten out these problems. But guess who was the last person that was prosecuted under the old rules? Arnold Feldman. That's called a bill of attainder. That's not even legal. They prosecuted me. I had no due process. There was no judge. The jury was the judge was the jury, and my brother, who's a pretty smart guy, says, they could have taken the janitor and put a black robe on him. Would have been the same darn thing. You probably would have gotten a better shake. And so the point of the matter is that I can tell you right now, there's no due process there. There needs to be legislative oversight. Do not believe what they tell you. And don't think I don't respect Dr. Collada, because I do. And he's new there. But how can you take everything I earned and everything I worked for? That is my property. That is constitutionally guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Louisiana. And I am homeless at age 63 and unable to get a job in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, the other states, Puerto Rico, Guam, and American Samoa. I can't get a job anywhere. So what am I supposed to do with my Harvard education? Well, I'll tell you one thing I did at the behest of this man. I went to church. Thank God for that. But God has empowered me with a brain. And see, you ladies only hear this stuff. I went through this for 3.5 years. Now, if I was a bad doctor, and I don't disagree with this, they should have the power, if somebody's really bad, to suspend their license summarily pending a hearing. They should have that power. If it's that. Why did it take them 3.5 years to take my license away? You know why? Because this is what it is. And I want you to hear this very short. They're not truth seekers. They're case makers. Understand the difference? So I'm a victim, and my 1,000+ patients are victims, and my wife is a victim, and Dana, who wants to speak, is a victim.
Right there.
Well, oh, there you are. Okay, Dana was my right-hand person, and I'm going to leave it to Dana. And then I need to say something about Tanya James, but I was traveling back and forth to Linda's doctor, and I passed a place called Lexington, Virginia, and we went to the house of Stonewall Jackson. Those of you who have heard of Stonewall Jackson, I didn't realize this. He was shot by his own troops. They had to amputate his left arm, and Robert E. Lee said, he lost his left arm, and I lost my right arm when he died 8 days later. Dana became the target of the director of investigations, and you look at Dana. Dana comes from a big family, a very, very, very prominent family, And they looked at her, and despite her being a disabled American, they forced me to fire her in the middle of the night. Now, what due process, what authority does the Director of Investigations have to force a Louisiana citizen to fire a disabled American employee? Can you come up with a statute? Is it 49,964? Is it 37,1252? I do not know. But this is what happened to me. And one other thing, I had a patient that and I have to say this because her daughter asked me. I had a patient that was 40 years old, kind of like your relative, and she had four surgeries by a surgeon who operated on her December 31st and then moved out of town. Where's the medical board there? And he destroyed this woman's life. So I rescued her, and I implanted a spinal cord, a spinal morphine pump, of which I am one of the world's experts, not a local yokel. I'm a world's expert in this. Dana has one. And she got better. And they pulled her aside because she was vulnerable because her house burned down. Her name was Tanya James. And they went to her and they said, listen, we want to get Dana, because Dana was my right hand, like Stonewall Jackson. And she helped me maintain these pumps, of which I had 250 patients. That's a lot for one guy. I mean, in that type of thing. It's very labor intensive. But Dana was my right hand. My wife was also my right hand. So I had two right hands. And so they went to this girl, Tanya James. They said, listen, we're going to get Dr. Feldman, and we want you to snap pictures without a subpoena, HIPAA violation, and they promised immunity to these people. Where's the due process there? And so she did that, and then she went to the pharmacy. She left my practice, and I thought to myself, because I knew my patients pretty well, I knew what they had for breakfast, most of them. And I said, where's Tanya? I hadn't seen Tanya in about 3 weeks or a month. Oh, she's left. Well, I said, what do you mean she left? So I go to the pharmacy where she went, and they said, oh, she went, the board told her to leave you, that they're going to take your license away. This is before I even had a trial. And she wound up dead 2 days later in the trailer of one of their paid informants named Andrea Heimbach. I want to repeat that. She wound up dead in the trailer of one of their paid informants in Livingston Parish, I think. So I went to the coroner, a guy named Coe, who I don't know personally. I said, I want to see the autopsy report. Well, we didn't do an autopsy. I said, what do you mean you didn't do an autopsy? Oh, well, she was a drug addict. I said, really? So after I sent a private investigator over there to get the autopsy report, I said, okay, well, you say she took too many pills. Where's the pills? Oh, we flushed them down the toilet. So what I'm telling you is this, is that we heard a little testimony. I lived through this, and you see what happened to me. Harvard-trained physician, unemployable. Dead patients at the hands of this medical board. No due process, no records, no nothing. Hearsay, they convicted me. You read what they wrote about me, it looks like I'm like Jack the Ripper, but I'm really a good guy, and I can help people. And so my license is up, my suspension is up. I lost everything. I lost a $10 million building. I couldn't help you get to your car at this point. But in 6 months, when my suspension's up, they're never going to give me my license back. That's like Charles Manson getting parole. It's never going to happen. You know why? Because I challenged them, and I'm telling you the truth. So if you'll do for me one thing, look at your senator compatriots who passed this bill, I think 36-0. 36 to, now you guys are every bit as experienced and smart as they are.
Smarter.
And smarter. I'm sorry. I'm not politically correct. Smarter than they are. And they were undaunted. They were not dissuaded by, oh, I think the rules say this and I think the rules say that. And if you will take what I say, and you don't have to believe me, ask Steve Carter, who was one of my good friends and a patient. Ask Franklin Foyle, who knows me well. I could give you the names of many, many people that know me well and looked at me as a verifiable person, as a generous person, as a hardworking person. And if don't do it for me, my life is destroyed. Do it for the future. Do it to prevent any more of these things that we're talking about, the suicides. Do it for Dana Bramlett, who lost an $80,000 a year job and now can't support herself. By the way, she was the sole provider. Her husband had kidney failure and was on dialysis. She was the sole provider. And I said to them, how can you do this? She's the sole provider. Didn't care. So the point of the matter is, I care, and I know you people care. And the one thing I love about big government buildings is I always tell people this, because I've seen it. You know, it's nice that you spend our tax money on marble floors and things like that, but you know what? If somebody drops a little drop of water and you slip, you're going to be one of my patients. But the bad part is I can't help you anymore. But maybe one day I'll be able to resurrect myself with your help. And if not, then I will be a fading memory. But if you can't do it for me, and I don't expect you to, but I am a citizen here, if you'll please do it for yourselves and your children and the rest of the people in Louisiana. And that medical board, you know what? You want to straighten it out? Put me on the medical board, because I know how things should be. And doctors are generally good people and shouldn't be made to commit suicide. But I've got to tell you right now, it's bad enough dealing with the federal government, bad enough dealing with Blue Cross, bad enough dealing with sick people, bad enough dealing with cancer. And when you do that 57 times a day, and then you got to deal with this, you can see why these people are pushed over the edge. And you know what? This is what I say.
We have a question for you. Is that
Go ahead,
okay?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm finished, and thank you.
Representative Johnson.
For my
Dr. Is it Farber?
Feldman.
Feldman. It's Feldman?
Yes, sir. Farber was one they got a few years ago.
Okay. Then I'm going to withdraw my question.
Okay. Mrs. Feldman, did you want to speak?
Well, this is all out of my element, but he's probably said everything that I needed to say. But I mean, I want to back up what he said. I went through this. I've been through this with all of him, and there is no due process in this whole process. So I kept saying, how can they accuse you of anything with no evidence? I kept saying, just show me just one piece of evidence, and they didn't show anything. So I mean, they've accused this man who has dedicated his life to his patients, and he loves his patients. They love him, and they're all lost without him. And honestly and truly, I mean, this whole board, they need to be revised. I mean, because I've never seen anything in my life how you can convict somebody of a crime and not even have one piece of evidence, due process at all.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Bramlett,
Okay.
please identify yourself.
Sarah.
Identify yourself, please.
Oh, okay. My name is Dana Bramlett. I'm from Walker, Louisiana. I'm 39 years old. I'm married of 15 years, I think. But I have my mom and my dad. And when I was little, my mom and dad was self-employed, and they taught me hard work and how to exceed in life. And if you want good things in life, you got to work hard at it. So when I graduated high school, I went to Southeastern University, and when I finished there, I decided I wanted to go into the medical field because I want to help people. I like interacting with people and helping people. So I went to surgical technology school, and when I finished surgical technology school, my first job at a school was Dr. Feldman, and that was in 2004. I started working for him. And then in 2005, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. To tell you what kind of person Dr. Feldman is, him and his wife, Miss Feldman, brought me all the way to Houston to find the best physician to get the best care for me. And I really appreciate that. Sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, tell them.
Okay, and so working with Dr. Feldman, I wanted to learn everything. I worked hard. I wanted to get better and do everything I could to help the patients. So in 2011, I got a bad relapse from my multiple sclerosis, and I was sitting at my desk working, and I couldn't sit up. I couldn't stand. I couldn't talk. It was like I had a stroke. Well, Dr. Feldman accommodated me. I went to the doctor and had some treatments done, and he accommodated me and let me come back and promoted me as administrator. And so Dr. Feldman, let me tell you a little bit about him. He is a hard worker. I've never seen anybody. He would get there 8 o'clock in the morning and stay to 10 and 11 o'clock at night. This is no lie. We would stay and take care of our patients to everyone that was needed help. We wouldn't leave to go home early. He was a perfectionist. He wanted everything to be done just right. He wasn't worried about money. We would take care of poor patients that couldn't pay anything, and they would pay the minimum every month. We would do procedures on them that cost thousands of dollars, and they might pay whatever their copay was or whatever, and they'd pay every so often. This is the kind of person Dr. Feldman is. He is not a criminal, and that is what the medical board has made him out to be. And moving on to my situation, in 2014, Dr. Feldman got called to the board for a meeting. And so I was sat at home, was waiting to hear from him, and I never heard anything. So actually, I was on my way to the office to move patients around. I said, well, maybe I should move the 8 o'clock patients to a later time until I heard from him. Well, I was on my way, and actually I was by Airline Highway, and he called me. I said, I'm on the way to move patients. He says, don't worry about it. Can you come to my house? I said, yes, sir. And so I went to his house, and he said, come on in. And these are the exact words I remember. Have a seat. I said, okay. And he said, Linda, where do we start? He says, okay, I'm just going to tell you. Cecilia Mouton is making me fire you, or I'm going to lose my license. So just like that, I lost my job, no notice. I had my husband that I was taking care of for kidney failure. I had no income coming in. And because of the medical board, I have lost my professional, I've lost my profession. Now I can't do anything. Now I'm on Social Security disability because the board has ruined my career. And I think that's all I want to say. I'm just asking you to please support this bill and don't let this happen to future people. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Please identify yourself. I want you to communicate, but we are running short of time. So
I understand, Mr.
We
Chairman.
still got a lot of folks to talk.
I'll be brief.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the distinguished committee, I'm Andrew Schlafly. I'm General Counsel for the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, which is a national group. And I may have as much experience as anyone nationwide looking at various medical boards in different states, hearing complaints from physicians, seeing how their procedures work. I've testified a number of times over in Texas before their legislative committees. And on a personal note, a little humorous, I hope, I grew up on the Mississippi River, seeing the Mississippi River outside of our house, and was fed catfish every Friday by my mother, who is Phyllis Schlafly, and some of you may know of her. She passed away about 1.5 years ago. Louisiana, the Medical Board of Louisiana has been overzealous in some cases, and we've known that even before this legislation came on the horizon. We knew the Louisiana Medical Board has had a tendency to be overzealous and unfair to a number of physicians. I would have put it as one of the top 2 or 3 medical boards that are unfair to physicians at times. I'm not saying they're unfair to everybody, but at times they've been unfair. And we went and pulled some statistics while this hearing was going. The latest data we could find that's published on this was from 2009, 2011, and Louisiana was number 2 in the entire country in the most actions per physician that the board has taken. So it's an aggressive board when you put it in perspective nationwide. This bill is an excellent bill, and we haven't discussed as much as we should have, really, the contents of the bill, the provisions that are in here. They're just superb in protecting due process. And due process is a bipartisan issue. I've gotten a call from a Republican legislator in Texas asking me about this bill and how impressed he is with this bill and how he feels that once it gets passed here in Louisiana, he wants to get it passed in Texas to follow the lead that Louisiana did. And that's a Republican who's doing this. It's just due process right down the way. This could be in a textbook of when you want protections for due process, what would you do? Well, you'd give the accused notice. You'd make sure there's no bias. You'd make sure there's no ex parte communications. You'd make sure the person has access to the file. And all the debate we've had today about whether they have the doctor has access or not, well, let's make sure they have access. I mean, let's make sure they have access. I mean, there shouldn't be any objection to giving them access, and I don't think there would be. No anonymous hearsay. I mean, that's pretty fundamental. I think most people would look at this and say, well, they're not doing that.
We
are they?
we have the bill, so you don't have to
okay.
read it to us.
Okay, but it is a fantastic protection of due process that Republicans support, Democrats support. It's necessary to have safeguards against overzealous people, particularly with a medical license. We're an association of physicians, and we've had insightful comments about how much stress physicians are under already. And I can tell you firsthand in dealing with many of our members that when on top of their stress of practicing medicine, they get hit with a medical board complaint and an investigation by the medical board, many of them do go to the brink. And obviously we've heard testimonies, some have committed suicide. Obviously not all of them commit suicide, but even the ones who don't commit suicide, it changes their life. They lose their enthusiasm. They get very disillusioned, and the stress is overwhelming. It just is. And you need due process protections. And the due process protections enhance the finding of truth. It's helpful in getting the bad doctors. To have good due process in procedure makes it more efficient and easier to get the bad doctors. So you're not wasting time and scarce resources in trying to harass or be overzealous against somebody. You know that all of your money that's being spent on the medical board is being channeled to get the bad doctors, which you can get when due process is in effect. So there's nothing in this bill that interferes in any way with getting the bad doctors. What it does do is it protects the accused, the most vulnerable, the people who are good doctors but who are subjected to a bad faith complaint. And in Texas, they have passed some parts of this. They passed, for example, a law in Texas that says when it's an insurance company that files a complaint against the doctor, the Texas Medical Board is required to turn over a copy of that complaint to the doctor. That wasn't happening. And I asked the executive director in Texas when I had a deposition of her, because we had a lawsuit against the Texas Medical Board, and I asked her what happened to the number of complaints by insurance companies against doctors once that law passed. And she said it dropped enormously. Just that transparency. And don't you think that if a doctor is being subjected to a complaint by an insurance company, don't you think the doctor should know that? So that he can defend himself and say, yeah, the insurance company didn't want to pay the bill. That's why they complained. They didn't want to pay the bill. But currently in Louisiana, insurance companies can complain against doctors, and the doctors have no right to know that. They have no ability to defend themselves against complaints by insurance companies against them, which have nothing to do with the quality of care. It's because the insurance companies don't want to pay the bill. And that's not right. That's not right to put a doctor through that stress. When the doctor's trying to help the patient, provides the services, and the insurance company doesn't want to pay the bill, the insurance company goes and complains to the medical board and sticks the medical board on the doctor. This is a tremendous bill that is really landmark legislation, and I urge everybody on this committee, Republican and Democrat, to support this bill. This will be historic. This could be in a textbook. Everything in here is the sort of due process that we would all want for ourselves, for our own children and relatives. It ensures that the process will be one of finding the truth, and that anything that's done in bad faith will get caught by these due process procedures and not be allowed to proceed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Short for time, we want to hear the truth, but we'd like to make it as fast as possible. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Chairman Hoffman and members of the committee, and I will try to keep my testimony on point to the legislation at hand. My name is Lisa Robin, and I'm the Chief Advocacy Officer for the Federation of State Medical Boards. On behalf of the FSMB, I would like to take this opportunity to comment on Senate Bill 286 and strongly urge the committee to oppose this legislation. The FSMB believes the provisions contained in SB 286 would severely limit the effective functioning of the Louisiana State Board of Medical Examiners and would be a very stark departure from regulatory best practices. The FSMB is a national nonprofit organization whose members include the 70 state medical and osteopathic boards of the U.S., its territories, and the District of Columbia. The FSMB serves as a collective voice for state medical boards with the goal of improving and advancing the nation's state medical regulatory system. We provide a variety of services to support state boards in carrying out their statutory responsibilities to protect the public, including developing model policies and identifying best practices for states. As such, the FSMB is well positioned to comment on SB 286. I will address our concerns in no order of priority. First, the ability of a state board to carry out its mandate of public protection is dependent upon its ability to receive, prioritize, and evaluate adverse information related to a physician's professional behavior and competence that may impact patient safety. Boards gather this information from a variety of sources, including but not limited to complaints from patients, peers, and hospitals, as well as information contained in the National Practitioner Data Bank and the FSMB's Physician Data Center. Section 1293, paragraph 11, proposes that no anonymous hearsay testimony shall be allowed in any hearing. The physician who is the subject of the action shall have the right to confront witnesses. There are many reasons why a complainant may wish to file a complaint, ranging from an unintentional medical error to gross negligence. Depending upon the sensitivity of the issues, complainants may wish to have their identities remain anonymous, such as in cases of sexual boundary violations or misconduct in the workplace. The rights of the individuals who report must be carefully balanced against those who have been reported, so as not to inhibit individuals from reporting information that may have an immediate impact on patient safety. The FSMB's best practices guidance, elements of a state medical and osteopathic board, passed unanimously by representatives of the nation's medical boards. The following shall be privileged and confidential: all investigations and records of investigations, any report from any source concerning the fitness of any person to receive or hold a license, any communication between or among the board and or its committees, staff, advisors, attorneys, employees, hearing officers, consultants, experts, investigators, and panels occurring outside public meetings. A complaint and the identity of an individual or entity filing an initial complaint. In fact, the majority of state medical boards assure confidentiality to complainants reporting violations in good faith. At a time when physician sexual abuse and the physician's role in spurring the opioid epidemic have been spotlighted in national news, it is important that state medical boards have the resources and authority to investigate all complaints, regardless of the source of the information. Disclosing the identities of all complainants may have a chilling effect on the willingness of patients, family members, and colleagues to report physicians who fail to meet standards of professional conduct and competency. Second, the proposed language in Section 1293, paragraphs 2 and 3, would limit the ability of the LSBME to timely investigate complaints by allowing the physician to request removal or disqualification of the assigned investigator. Further, the proposed language states a board investigator shall have no communication regarding the investigation with the executive director or any member of the board unless the physician that is the subject to the complaint is present. As a regulatory body entrusted with the responsibility for the licensure and discipline of physicians within this state, the LSBME, including staff, board members, and investigators, must be able to communicate when necessary to ensure patient safety. Third, the FSMB policy referenced above sets forth powers necessary for boards to fulfill their duty to the public, including the authority to summarily suspend a license prior to hearing. FSMB believes that Section 1293, paragraph 12, would limit the board's ability to take immediate action in instances in which there is evidence of imminent patient harm. It should be noted that passage of this bill has implications well beyond the state of Louisiana, in that 43% of the physicians holding a Louisiana medical license are licensed to practice in at least one other state. Limiting the board's investigative and adjudicatory authority would create a gap in the oversight of physicians practicing in multiple states and could allow egregious and negligent behavior to continue across state lines with potentially tragic results for patients. In conclusion, the FSMB believes existing procedures in Louisiana's state administrative procedure laws provide sufficient procedures and protections for a physician licensee under investigation. The existing state laws and rules strike the appropriate balance between the rights of an individual under investigation and the functioning of a state agency in furtherance of the public interest. I know you've heard a great deal of testimony today on specific cases. I urge you not to cripple to the entire regulatory framework that would allow the professions to have necessary oversight. In fact, I know that you have each received a letter from the Federation of Associations of Regulatory Boards expressing serious concerns that this would be applied to the other professions beyond the health professions. I urge you to oppose this legislation and think of the long-term impact this legislation would have on the patients in Louisiana. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Yes, sir.
Can appeal to a court, but you go through the administrative process. First, Representative Horton, and with respect, Representative Miller, Auditor Prepara told me that not a single investigative file has been turned over pursuant to their request. Catherine Daniel of Bowbridge, and by the way, this is our investigation without having the benefit of any records from the board. This is simply talking to physicians in the community in Louisiana. Catherine Daniel, Bowbridge. John Scott Sabille, Opelousas. Dr. Wallace Reynolds, New Orleans. Dr. Miles Gott, Baton Rouge. William Ben Hart, New Orleans. Kevin McKinley, New Orleans. Dr. Herzog, Slidell. Dr. Whitecloud, New Orleans. Dr. Ramey, Baton Rouge. Dr. Kopleski, Simmsport. All of those are doctors that have been reported to have committed suicide in the midst or upon dealings with the medical board. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow legislators, if anyone comes up here and presents to you that there's not a problem, I think the diagnosis of that representation would be denial. Not only have multiple physicians taken their lives, but other doctors have had their careers ruined. And I understand that you all need to know that the certain investigator that we're not supposed to name, who they say is supposed to be replaced at some point, she's been here how long? 15 years? And she's famous outside of Louisiana, infamous. She's infamous in Louisiana, and it's taken her 20 years, taken them 20 years to get rid of her, to give her a pink slip. Well, you know what? Who gave the pink slip to these physicians? Who went and apologized to their families? Chad Hargan was a doctor in Shreveport that was famous for getting into bed with his patients and holding them and praying for them when they were dying of terminal cancer. And he met with the investigator that we're not supposed to name on or about July 17, 2017. Less than 24 hours later, blows his brains out. For someone to come up to this table and pretend that we do not have a problem, you're in denial. And at Dr. Hargan's funeral, in the same town where I have my legislative office and where I've been practicing law and living for over 30 years, at First United Methodist. Do you know where it is? It's at the head of Texas Street. It's the same church that inspired Hank Williams to write I Saw the Light, that church. At his visitation, The line stretched for hours. And this one woman expressed very well the sentiment of the community. And I understand these collateral damage, and I understand they don't want to tweak their policies, and I understand they don't want to hand their documents over to Daryl Perpera. This woman grabbed a family member and said, "You don't understand what Dr. Hargan did when I thought I was dying of cancer and I was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he held me and prayed with me and encouraged me." She said, "There's not another doctor in Shreveport that would have done that." And I do apologize to you all that we didn't have more physicians. This is the problem, Representative Miller. They're terrified to come in here because of 20 years of abusive and retaliatory practices that, Representative Johnson, you would not condone 1 minute. And you,
tell you one of the names that you mentioned in your closing here today.
okay?
Hold on, folks. Hold on, Representative Johnson.
Okay, well,
It's very disparaging.
okay. Well, I'm
So
glad
I'm
that you-
asking you, with
Okay.
every bit of decency that I can muster, calm down.
Okay, well,
Because I will tell you what I prosecute.
willing
I
to
won't
have
mention the name of that individual, but urinating on an African American police officer. Okay? So let's not go there.
Okay,
Okay? And let's not talk
Representative
about
Johnson?
those things.
Representative Johnson?
Let's keep it to this bill
Representative Johnson.
and to the conduct that's before here and to the merits that are on these pieces of paper.
Okay, Representative
Okay.
Johnson.
Okay, let's,
The doctors that have committed suicide, that's the reason that this passed out of the Senate unanimously, in large part. But that's not all.
Direct evidence, Senator, that doctors committed suicide.
This is our investigation. We have not been given the investigative files. And may I continue with my closing, Mr. Chairman?
okay, let me just ask both of you to stop for a moment. I think you made your point, and I think you heard his point. So let's continue.
And it's not just the doctors that have committed suicide. And again, I don't think we need to be in denial. What about there's actually 11 African-American female employees in the accounting department at the medical board that were fired or discharged in or about the summer of 2015 all at one time? Gee, I wonder what they had access to in the accounting department. Was it the fact that the board, which gets millions of dollars from doctors that they shake down, was allowing computer equipment to individuals? But this is what we do know. One of the 11 employees, after other employees and witnesses heard her being berated and screamed at by the investigative agent that we're not supposed to name, she went home and committed suicide. So we've got dead doctors, we've got a dead employee of the board, and let Mr. Collada come up here and deny that a board employee committed suicide after being ranted and raved at by the board investigator that we're not supposed to name. But let's talk about dead patients. Dr. Stevens was told, "You will have no patient contact. Terminate it now." He says, "I've got a suicidal patient in a hotel." He was told, "We don't care. You need to cut him loose." He said, "Well, can I talk to Cecilia Mouton?" "No, cease patient contact." And basically, he had to call the police to go ahead. He wasn't even allowed to make a transfer of medical care arrangements for that suicidal patient. What he could do is he called the police, and they responded to the suicidal patient. Now, who did that put in danger? It put the patient in danger, put the police in danger. What about other patients? Dr. Guyenfort testified that when Dr. Stevens was ordered to quit treating his patients, he lost 2 of his patients. So that's at least 2 patients. Well, wait a minute. It goes further. Dr. Feldman says that Tanya James, and he named her, after the board members went to her and told her, "You need to change physicians because we're going to take his license away," she ended up being treated by another doctor, and after his careful care and after she was transferred to a doctor not familiar with her case, she overdosed. She's now gone. So that's patients, doctors, and employee that are now gone.
go ahead and let him
Well,
continue. his
okay,
closing,
Representative
please.
Bagley. Well, and I guess, okay, but you know what? If it's bad, we should do something about it, not just look the other way. I understand, and so would the families, but they can't. There's nothing they can do about it. Now, let's talk about Dr. Stevens was threatened with the loss of his license if he didn't immediately sign a consent decree. By the way, where is the board investigator who's at the crux at all these? Hasn't bothered to come to the hearing.
I'll do it, but he's in closing.
This is what we also know. While this board investigator was going after doctors, she was having an affair with the lawyer that was in the law firm that represented the doctors. Blatant conflict of interest. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if the board is complaining about this, Mr. Stolye, who was
Sir, that's a bald-faced lie.
Okay, well, have a
bald-faced
seat.
lie.
Have a seat, Stolye. Have a seat. Well, maybe we can go ahead and get to the written record on that.
Okay, let's kind of get settled down. Senator, we do want you to close.
Okay. Well,
and
basically,
take
what
the action we're going to take.
the reality is that the board doctor has admitted, Dr. Marier has admitted, that Mr. Stolye was having an affair with the board investigator that's not supposed to be named, while his law firm was representing doctors accused of medical misconduct. I would like to read you, this is a quote from Louisiana Voice on March 18, 2016. Quote, Mouton, while still employed in 2010 as an investigator who looked into complaints about doctors, married attorney Jack Stolye, who at the time represented physicians who were subjects of investigations and had disciplinary actions pending before the board. So, and by the way, that was a quote from taken from Dr. Mark Dawson. He said that Stolye quit representing doctors when he got married. Let's listen to
Senator, we'd like you to finish your closing.
I will.
The speaker has called us to be on the floor.
This is
and
what
we are
Board
ready to
Director
go.
Robert Marier said in a letter. He said, quote, a personal relationship between Dr. Mouton and Mr. Stolye began in October 2016. So the board admitted that they were having a relationship while he was representing doctors that were the subject of disciplinary proceedings and while Cecilia Mouton was prosecuting them. We feel like that's a conflict of interest. We also want to say the witnesses have said repeatedly that there should not be anonymous complaints. If they read the bill, Mr. Chairman, the bill does not prohibit anonymous complaints. It simply says that when you get to the trial, you actually that the doctor is actually allowed to cross-examine a witness and not just have an email from an unidentified complainant. So this bill in no way, in no shape or form, ever prohibit anonymous complaints.
Senator, you are finished closing. Would you entertain a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Representative Johnson.
I did want to say this.
Representative Johnson.
And
No?
I want to say this because I think it's important.
Okay.
My father-in-law was a prosecutor for 24 years. Prosecuted murder cases, Representative Stagney, I think in your district, armed robbery cases. He was the president of the Louisiana District Attorneys Association and also the United States District Attorneys Association. And basically, this rubric that because we have to prosecute doctors, we have to break all the rules, is false. Just to the contrary. As legislators, we have rules to follow. As physicians, there are rules to follow. As judges, there are rules to follow. As a prosecutor, he was very well loved in the community because he conducted himself with integrity. That's exactly what hasn't happened. And what the part of the story that they leave out is that when they call upon a doctor, they basically tell him, if you don't sign a consent, we're going to take away your license. And at the point where they tell the doctor to sign the consent to be evaluated at a physician's health facility, they've had no trial, no due process, no cross-examination, no rights at all. And in 2015, there was an attempt to do something substantive to change the law so that we would have fair and transparent proceedings. And what we get in this case is we get a doctor who brings Dr. Stevens, he says, this is confidential medical records. He was standing holding them outside in the hallway last week. If they're confidential, why do you bring them out of your office and present them to a potential witness? What was the purpose of that? To try to intimidate him out of testifying about what he knew? And then when Dr. Stevens said, can I please have a copy of my own records? He said no. And so it's really interesting that the board is willing to bring doctors' psychiatric files to try to get them to be quiet, but when it's time for the Louisiana legislative auditor to look at their records, they say, well, there's 3 outside agencies that have objected to it. Daryl Prepara has stated that 2 of them did not object, and that he's working through any concerns with a third. So that's false testimony. And if they have nothing to hide, they should have allowed Mr. Prepara to go in and look at their investigative files. And his statement to me, and I'm not sure if it was on the record, he said he has not been given the first investigative file. If they're not ashamed of their proceedings,
Okay,
well,
Senator, then we've just been called. Can I consider that your closing?
yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, committee, you've heard an interesting day. We've had a lot of testimony. What would you like to do? Anybody have a motion? There you go. Representative Miller?
Substitute motion to involuntary defer.
I'm sorry, it's Representative Richard. Go ahead.
I make a motion, move forward.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Representative Richard to move forward with the bill, as you've heard, with amendments. Is there any opposition?
No, Representative Miller has a substitute.
All right, Representative Miller.
Make a substitute motion to involuntarily defer, and I'll tell you the reason why. You mentioned Dr. Sabil in Opelousas. I knew that guy's family, and I never once heard that it was anything to do with the medical board.
Okay.
So please, before you mention my district again, come talk to me.
Okay, sir.
Okay, we have a substitute motion to involuntarily defer. Is there any opposition? Without opposition, we'll involuntarily defer.
Hold on a minute, sir.
Kenny, did you? Tell him.
There was no opposition.
I thought, okay, did you?
Representative Amity. Committee, I'm not sure. The speaker has called us. Can we just put you on for next week? Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. We are adjourned.